Part 1 of The Creature from Cleveland Depths by Fritz Leiber. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Greg Marguerite. Part 1 of The Creature from Cleveland Depths by Fritz Leiber. Here is a modern tale of an inner-directed sorcerer and an outer-directed sorcerer's apprentice. A tale of the creature from Cleveland Depths. "Come on, Gussie," Fay prodded quietly. "Quit stalking around like a neurotic bear and suggest something for my invention team to work on. I enjoy visiting you and Daisy, but I can't stay above ground all night." "If being outside the shelters makes you nervous, don't come around any more," Gusterson told him, continuing to stalk. "Why doesn't your invention team think of something to invent? Why don't you?" Huh! In the huh lay triumphant condemnation of a whole way of life. "We do," Fay responded imperturbably, "but a fresh viewpoint sometimes helps." "I'll say it does. Fay, you burglar, I'll bet you've got 20 people like myself you milk for free ideas. First you irritate their bark, and then you make the rounds every so often to draw off the latex or the maple gloop." Fay smiled. "It ought to please you that society still has a use for you ultra inner-directed types. It takes something to make a junior executive stay above ground after dark when the missiles are on the prowl." "Society can't have much use for us or it'd pay us something," Gusterson sourly asserted, staring blankly at the tankless TV and kicking it lightly as he passed on. "No, you're wrong about that, Gussie. Money's not the key goad with you inner-directeds. I got that straight from our motivations chief." "Did he tell you what we should use instead to pay the grocer? A deep inner sense of achievement, maybe? Fay, why should I do any free thinking for micro systems?" "I'll tell you why, Gussie. Simply because you get a kick out of insulting us with sardonic ideas. If we take one of them seriously, you think we're degrading ourselves, and that pleases you even more. Like making someone laugh at a lousy pun." Gusterson held still in his roaming and grinned. "That the reason? Huh. I suppose my suggestions would have to be something in the line of ultra-subminiaturized computers where one sinister fine-etched molecule does the work of 3 big bumbling brain cells." "Not necessarily. Microsystems is branching out. Wheel as free as a rogue star. But I'll pass along to promotion your 1-molecule 3-brain-cell sparkler. It's a slight exaggeration, but it's catchy." "I'll have my kids watch your ads to see if you use it, and then I'll sue the whole underworld." Gusterson frowned as he resumed his stalking. He stared puzzledly at the antique TV. "How about inventing a plutonium termite?" he said suddenly. "It would get rid of those stockpiles that are worrying your moles to death." Fay grimaced noncommittally and cocked his head. "Well, then, how about a beauty mask? How about that, hey? I don't mean one to repair a woman's complexion, but one she'd wear all the time, that'd make her look like a 17-year-old sex pot. That'd end her worries." "Hey, that's for me," Daisy called from the kitchen. "I'll make Gusterson suffer. I'll make him crawl around on his hands and knees begging my immature favors." "No, you won't," Gusterson called back. "You having a face like that would scare the kids. Better cancel that one, Fay. Half the adult race looking like Vina Vidarson is too awful a thought." "Yeah, you're just scared of making $1 million," Daisy jeered. "I sure am," Gusterson said solemnly, scanning the fuzzy floor from one murky glass wall to the other, hesitating at the TV. "How about something homey now, like a flock of little prickly cylinders that roll around the floor collecting lint and flub? They'd work by electricity, or at a pinch cats could bat 'em around. Every so often they'd be automatically herded together and the lint cleaned off the bristles." "No good," Fay said. "There's no lint underground, and cats are verboten. And the above ground market doesn't amount to more money-wise than the state of Southern Illinois. Keep it grander, Gussie, and more impractical. You can't sell people merely useful ideas." From his hassock in the center of the room, he looked uneasily around. "Say, did that violet tone in the glass come from the high Cleveland hydrogen bomb, or is it just age and ultraviolet, like desert glass?" "No, somebody's grandfather liked it that color," Gusterson informed him with happy bitterness. "I like it too. The glass, I mean, not the tint. People who live in glass houses can see the stars, especially when there's a window washing streak in their germ plasm." "Gussie, why don't you move underground?" Fay asked, his voice taking on a missionary note. "It's a lot easier living in one room, believe me. You don't have to tramp from room to room hunting things." "I like the exercise," Gusterson said stoutly. "But I bet Daisy'd prefer it underground, and your kids wouldn't have to explain why their father lives like a red Indian. Not to mention the safety factor and insurance savings, and a crypt church within easy slidewalk distance. Incidentally, we see stars all the time, better than you do, by repeater." "Stars by repeater," Gusterson murmured to the ceiling, pausing for God to comment. Then, "No, Fay, even if I could afford it, and stand it, I'm such a bad luck Harry that just when I got us all safely stowed at the N-1 sublevel, the Soviets would discover an earthquake bomb that struck from below, and I'd have to follow everybody back to the treetops. Hey, how about bubble homes in orbit around Earth? Microsystems could subdivide the world's most spacious suburb, and all you moles could go ellipsing. Space is as safe as there is. No air, no shock waves. Free fall's the ultimate in restfulness. Great health benefits. Commute by rocket. Or better yet, stay home and do all your business by TV telephone, or by Waldo, if it were that sort of thing. Even pet your girl by remote control. She in her bubble, you in yours, whizzing through vacuum. Oh, damn, 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 damn!" He was glaring at the blank screen of the TV, his big hands clenching and unclenching. "Don't let Fay give you apoplexy. He's not worth it," Daisy said, sticking her trim head in from the kitchen, while Fay inquired anxiously, "Gussie, what's the matter?" "Nothing, you worm," Gusterson roared. "Except that an hour ago I forgot to tune in on the only TV program I've wanted to hear this year. Finnegan's Wake, scored for English, Gaelic, and Brogue. Oh, damn, damn, damn!" "Too bad," Fay said lightly. "I didn't know they were releasing it on flat TV, too." "Well, they were. Some things are too damn big to keep completely underground, and I had to forget. I'm always doing it. I miss everything. Look here, you rat," he blatted suddenly at Fay, shaking his finger under the latter's chin. "I'll tell you what you can have that ignorant team of yours invent. They can fix me up a mechanical secretary that I can feed orders into, and that'll remind me when the exact moment comes to listen to TV, or phone somebody, or mail in a story, or write a letter, or pick up a magazine, or look at an eclipse, or a new orbiting station, or fetch the kids from school, or buy Daisy a bunch of flowers, or whatever it is. It's got to be something that's always with me, not something I have to go and consult, or that I can get sick of and put down somewhere. And it's got to remind me forcibly enough so that I take notice and don't just shrug it aside, like I sometimes do even when Daisy reminds me of things. That's what your stupid team can invent for me. If they do a good job, I'll pay 'em as much as $50. "That doesn't sound like anything so very original to me," Fay commented coolly, leaning back from the wagging finger. "I think all senior executives have something of that sort. At least their secretary keeps some kind of file." "I'm not looking for something with spiked falsies and nylons up to the neck," interjected Gusterson, whose idea about secretaries were a trifle lurid. "I just want a mech reminder, that's all." "Well, I'll keep the idea in mind," Fay assured him, "along with the bubble homes and beauty masks. If we ever develop anything along those lines, I'll let you know. If it's a beauty mask, I'll bring Daisy a pilot model to use to scare strange kids." He put his watch to his ear. "Good Lord, I'm going to have to cut to make it underground before the main doors close. Just 10 minutes to second curfew. Bye, Gus. Bye, Days." 2 minutes later, living room lights out, they watched Fay's foreshortened ant-like figure scurrying across the balding, ill-lit park toward the nearest escalator. Gusterson said, "Weird to think of that big, bright spaceport glamour basement stretching around everywhere underneath. Did you remind Smitty to put a new bulb in the elevator?" "The Smiths moved out this morning," Daisy said tonelessly. "They went underneath." "Like cockroaches," Gusterson said. "Cockroaches leaving a sinking apartment building. Next, the ghosts'll be retreating to the shelters." "Anyhow, from now on, we're our own janitors," Daisy said. He nodded. "Just leaves 3 families besides us loyal to this glass death trap, not countin' ghosts." He sighed. Then, "You like to move below, Daisy?" he asked softly, putting his arm lightly across her shoulders. "Get a woozy eyeful of the bright lights and all for a change? Be a rat for a while? Maybe we're getting too old to be bats. I could scrounge me a company job and have a thinking closet all to myself and 2 secretaries with stainless steel breasts. Life'd be easier for you and a lot cleaner. And you'd sleep safer." "That's true," she answered, and paused. She ran her fingertips slowly across the murky glass, its violet tint barely perceptible against a cold, dim light across the park. "But somehow," she said, snaking her arm around his waist, "I don't think I'd sleep happier or one bit excited." Chapter 2. 3 weeks later, Fay, dropping in again, handed to Daisy the larger of the 2 rather small packages he was carrying. "It's a so-called beauty mask," he told her, "complete with wig, eyelashes, and wettable velvet lips. It even breathes. Pinholed elastiskin with a static adherence charge. But Micro Systems had nothing to do with it, thank God. Beauty Tricks put it on the market 10 days ago, and it's already started a teenage craze. Some boys are wearing them too, and the police are yipping at Tricks for encouraging transvestism with psychic repercussions." "Didn't I hear somewhere that Tricks is a secret subsidiary of Micro?" Gusterson demanded, rearing up from his ancient electric typewriter. "No, you're not stopping me writing, Fay. It's the gut of everything. If I do any more, I won't have any juice to start with tomorrow. I got another of my insanity thrillers moving, a real id teaser. In this one, not only all the characters are crazy, but the robot psychiatrist too." "The vending machines are jumping with insanity novels," Fay commented. "Odd they're so popular." Gusterson chortled. "The only way you outer-directed moles will accept individuality anymore, even in a fictional character, without your superegos getting seasick, is for them to be crazy. Hey, Daisy, let me see that beauty mask." But his wife, backing out of the room, hugged the package to her bosom and solemnly shook her head. "A hell of a thing," Gusterson complained. "Not even able to see what my stolen ideas look like." "I've got a present for you too," Fay said. "Something you might think of as a royalty on all the inventions someone thought of a little ahead of you. $50 by your own evaluation." He held out the smaller package. "Your tickler." "My what?" Gusterson demanded suspiciously. "Your tickler. The mech reminder you wanted. It turns out that the file a secretary keeps to remind her boss to do certain things at certain times is called a tickler file. So we named this a tickler. Here." Gusterson still didn't touch the package. "You mean you actually put your invention team to work on that nonsense?" "Well, what do you think? Don't be scared of it. Here, I'll show you." As he unwrapped the package, Fay said, "It hasn't been decided yet whether we'll manufacture it commercially. If we do, I'll put through a voucher for you, for development consultation, or something like that. Sorry, no royalties possible. Davidson's squad had started to work up the identical idea 3 years ago, but it got shelved. I found it on a snoop through the closets. There. Looks rich, doesn't it?" On the scarred black tabletop was a dully gleaming silvery object, about the size and shape of a cupped hand with fingers merging. A tiny pellet on a short, near-invisible wire led off from it. On the back was a punctured area, suggesting the face of a microphone. There was also a window with a date and time in hours and minutes showing through, and next to that 4 little buttons in a row. The concave underside of the silvery hand was smooth except for a central area where what looked like two little rollers came through. "It goes on your shoulder under your shirt," Fay explained, "and you tuck the pellet in your ear. We might work up bone conduction on a commercial model. Inside is an ultra-slow fine wire recorder holding a spool that runs for a week. The clock lets you go to any place on the 7-day wire and record a message. The buttons give you variable speed in going there so you don't waste too much time making a setting. There's a knack in fingering them efficiently, but it's easily acquired." Fay picked up the tickler. "For instance, suppose there's a TV show you want to catch tomorrow night at 2200. He touched the buttons. There was the faintest whirring. The clock face blurred briefly 3 times before showing the setting he'd mentioned. Then Fay spoke into the punctured area. "Turn on TV channel 2, you big dummy." He grinned over at Gusterson. "When you've got all your instructions to yourself loaded in, you synchronize with the present moment and let her roll. Fit it on your shoulder and forget it. Oh, yes, and it literally does tickle you every time it delivers an instruction. That's what the little rollers are for. Believe me, you can't ignore it. Come on, Gussie, take off your shirt and try it out. We'll feed in some instructions for the next 10 minutes so you get the feel of how it works." "I don't want to," Gusterson said. Not right now. I want to sniff around it first." "My God, it's small. Besides everything else it does it think?" "Don't pretend to be an idiot, Gussie. You know very well that even with ultra submicro, nothing quite this small can possibly have enough elements to do any thinking." Gusterson shrugged. "I don't know about that. I think bugs think." Fay groaned faintly. "Bugs operate by instinct, Gussie," he said. A patterned routine. They do not scan situations and consequences and then make decisions." "I don't expect bugs to make decisions," Gusterson said. For that matter, I don't like people who go around all the time making decisions." "Well, you can take it from me, Gussie, that this tickler is just a miniaturized wire recorder and clock, and a tickler. It doesn't do anything else." "Not yet, maybe," Gusterson said darkly. "Not this model, Fay. I'm serious about bugs thinking. Or if they don't exactly think, they feel. They've got an interior drama, an inner glow. They're conscious, for that matter. Fay, I think all your really complex electronic computers are conscious, too." "Quit kidding, Gussie." "Who's kidding?" "You are. Computers simply aren't alive." "What's alive? A word. I think computers are conscious, at least while they're operating. They've got that inner glow of awareness. They sort of, well, meditate." "Gussie, computers haven't got any circuits for meditating. They're not programmed for mystical lucubrations. They've just got circuits for solving the problems they're on." "Okay, you admit they've got problem-solving circuits, like a man has. I say if they've got the equipment for being conscious, they're conscious. What has wings flies." "Including stuffed owls and gilt eagles and dodos and wood-burning airplanes?" "Maybe under some circumstances there was a wood-burning airplane. Fay," Gusterson continued, wagging his wrists for emphasis, "I really think computers are conscious. They just don't have any way of telling us that they are. Or maybe they don't have any reason to tell us, like the little Scotch boy who didn't say a word until he was 15 and was supposed to be deaf and dumb." "Why didn't he say a word?" "Because he never had anything to say. Or take those Hindu fakirs, Fay, who sit still and don't say a word for 30 years or until their fingernails grow to the next village. If Hindu fakirs can do that, computers can." Looking as if he were masticating a lemon, Fay asked quietly, "Gussie, did you say you were working on an insanity novel?" Gusterson frowned fiercely. "Now you're kidding," he accused Fay. "The dirty kind of kidding, too." "I'm sorry," Fay said with light contrition. "Well, now that you've sniffed at it, how about trying on Tickler?" He picked up the gleaming blunted crescent and jogged it temptingly under Gusterson's chin. "Why should I?" Gusterson asked, stepping back. "Fay, I'm up to my ears writing a book. The last thing I want is something interrupting me to make me listen to a lot of junk and do a lot of useless things." "But damn it, Gussie, it was all your idea in the first place. Fay blatted. Then, catching himself, he added, I mean, you were one of the first people to think of this particular sort of instrument. Maybe so, but I've done some more thinking since then. Gusterson's voice grew a trifle solemn. Inner-directed, worthwhile thinking. Fay, when a man forgets to do something, it's because he really doesn't want to do it, or because he's all roiled up down in his unconscious. He ought to take it as a danger signal and investigate the roiling, not hire himself a human or mech reminder. Bourgeois, Fay retorted. In that case, you shouldn't write memorandums or even take notes. Maybe I shouldn't, Gusterson agreed lamely. I'd have to think that over, too. Ha! Fay jeered. No, I'll tell you what your trouble is, Gussie. You're simply scared of this contraption. You've loaded your skull with horror story nonsense about machines sprouting minds and taking over the world, until you're even scared of a simple miniaturized and clocked recorder. He thrust it out. Maybe I am, Gusterson admitted, controlling a flinch. Honestly, Fay, that thing's got a gleam in its eye, as if it had ideas of its own. Nasty ideas. Gussie, you nut, it hasn't got an eye. Not now, no, but it's got the gleam. The eye may come. It's the Cheshire Cat in reverse. If you'd step over here and look at yourself holding it, you could see what I mean. But I don't think computers sprout minds, Fay. I just think they've got minds, because they've got the mind elements. Ho, ho, Fay mocked. Everything that has a material side has a mental side, he chanted. Everything that's a body is also a spirit. Gussie, that dubious old metaphysical dualism went out centuries ago. Maybe so, Gusterson said, but we still haven't anything but that dubious dualism to explain the human mind, have we? It's a jelly of nerve cells, and it's a vision of the cosmos. If that isn't dualism, what is? I give up, Gussie. Are you going to try out this tickler? No. But damn it, Gussie, we made it just for you. Practically. Sorry, but I'm not coming near the thing. Then come near me, a husky voice intoned behind them. Tonight I want a man. Standing in the door was something slim in a short silver sheath. It had golden bangs and the haughtiest snub-nosed face in the world. It slunk toward them. My God, it's Vina Viderson, Gusterson yelled. Daisy, that's terrific, Fay applauded, going up to her. She bumped him aside with a swing of her hips, continuing to advance. Not you, Ratty, she said throatily. I want a real man. Fay, I suggested Vina Viderson's face for the beauty mask, Gusterson said, walking around his wife and shaking a finger. Don't tell me Trix just happened to think of that, too. What else could they think of? Fay laughed. This season, sex means VV and nobody else. An odd little grin flicked his lips. A tic traveled up his face and his body twitched slightly. Say, folks, I'm going to have to leave. It's exactly 15 minutes to second curfew. Last time I had to run and I got heartburn. When are you people going to move downstairs? I'll leave Tickler, Gussie. Play around with it and get used to it. Bye now. Hey, Fay, Gusterson called curiously. Have you developed absolute time sense? Fay grinned a big grin from the doorway. Almost too big a grin for so small a man. I didn't need to, he said softly, patting his right shoulder. My tickler told me. He closed the door behind him. As, side by side, they watched him strut sedately across the murky, chilly-looking park, Gunderson mused. So the little devil had one of those nonsense gadgets on all the time, and I never noticed. Can you beat that? Something drew across the violet-tinged stars, a short, bright line that quickly faded. What's that? Gusterson asked gloomily. Next to last stage of missile here? Won't you settle for an old-fashioned shooting star? Daisy asked softly. The wettable velvet lips of the mask made even her natural voice sound different. She reached a hand back of her neck to pull the thing off. Hey, don't do that, Gusterson protested in a hurt voice. Not for a while, anyway. Okay, she said harshly, turning on him. Then down on your knees, dog. Chapter 3. It was a fortnight, and Gusterson was loping down the home stretch on his 40,000-word insanity novel before Fay dropped in again, this time promptly at high noon. Normally Fay cringed his shoulders a trifle and was inclined to slither, but now he strode aggressively, his legs scissoring in a fast, low goose step. He whipped off the sunglasses that all moles wore during topside by day and began to pound Gusterson on the back while calling boisterously, "How are you, Gussie, old boy, old boy?" Daisy came in from the kitchen to see why Gusterson was choking. She was instantly grabbed and violently bussed to the accompaniment of, "Hiya, gorgeous, yum, yum. How about ad-libbing that some weekend?" She stared at Fay dazedly, rasping the back of her hand across her mouth, while Gusterson yelled, "Quit that! What's got into you, Fay? Have they transferred you out of R&D to company morale? Do they line up all the secretaries at roll call and make you give them an 8-hour energizing kiss?" "Huh! Wouldn't you like to know?" Fay retorted. He grinned, twitched jumpingly, held still a moment, then hustled over to the far wall. "Look out there," he rapped, pointing through the violet glass at the gap between the two nearest old skyscraper apartments. "In 30 seconds you'll see them test the new needle bomb at the other end of Lake Erie. It's educational." He began to count off seconds, vigorously semaphoring his arm. 2, 3. "Gussie, I've put through a voucher for 2 yards for you. Budgeting squawked, but I pressured 'em." Daisy squealed, "Yards? Are those dollar thousands?" While Gusterson was asking, "Then you're marketing the tickler?" "Yes, yes," Fay replied to them in turn. 9, 10. Again he grinned and twitched. "Time for noon comstaff," he announced staccato. "Pardon the hush box." He whipped a pancake phone from under his coat, clapped it over his face, and spoke fiercely but inaudibly into it, continuing to semaphore. Suddenly he thrust the phone away. 29, 30. "Thar she blows." An incandescent streak shot up the sky from a little above the far horizon, and a doubly dazzling point of light appeared just above the top of it, with the effect of God dotting an I. "Ha! That'll skewer the espionage satellites like swatting flies," Fay proclaimed as the portent faded. "Bracing! Gussie, where's your tickler? I've got a new spool for it that'll razzle-dazzle you." "I'll bet," Gusterson said dryly. "Daisy?" "You gave it to the kids and they got to fooling with it and broke it." "No matter," Fay told them with a large sidewise sweep of his hand. "Better you wait for the new model. It's a 6-way improvement." "So I gather," Gusterson said, eyeing him speculatively. "Does it automatically inject you with cocaine? A fix every hour on the second?" "Ha ha, joke. Gussie, it achieves the same effect without using any dope at all. Listen, a tickler reminds you of your duties and opportunities, your chances for happiness and success. What's the obvious next step? Throw it out the window? By the way, how do you do that when you're underground? We have high-speed garbage boosts. The obvious next step is to give the tickler a heart. It not only tells you, it warmly persuades you. It doesn't just say, 'Turn on the TV channel 2 Joyce program.' It brills at you. 'Kid, old kid, race for the TV and flip that 2 switch. There's a great show coming through the pipes this second plus 10. You'll enjoy the hell out of yourself. Grab a ticket to ecstasy.'" "My God," Gusterson gasped. "Are those the kind of jolts it's giving you now?" "Don't you get it, Gussie? You never load your tickler except when you're feeling buoyantly enthusiastic. You don't just tell yourself what to do hour by hour next week. You sell yourself on it. That way you not only make doubly sure you'll obey instructions, but you constantly re-inoculate yourself with your own enthusiasm." "I can't stand myself when I'm that enthusiastic," Gusterson said. "I feel ashamed for hours afterwards." "You're warped. All this lonely sky life. What's more, Gussie, think how still more persuasive some of those instructions would be if they came to a man in his best girl's most bedroomy voice, or his doctor's, or Psycher's if it's that sort of thing, or Vina Vidarsson's." By the way, Days, don't wear that beauty mask outside. It's a grand misdemeanor ever since 10,000 teenagers rioted through Tunnel Mart wearing them, and VV's suing Trix. No chance of that, Daisy said. Gusterson got excited and bit off the nose. She pinched her own delicately. I'd no more obey my enthusiastic self, Gusterson was brooding, than I'd obey a Napoleon drunk on his own brandy, or a hopped up St. Francis. Re-inoculated with my own enthusiasm, I'd die, just like from a snake bite. Warped, I said. Fay dogmatized, stamping around. Gussie, having the instructions persuasive instead of neutral, turned out to be only the opening wedge. The next step wasn't so obvious, but I saw it. Using subliminal verbal stimuli in his tickler, a man can be given constant, supportive, euphoric therapy 24 hours a day. And it makes use of all that empty wire. We've revived the ideas of a pioneer dynamic psycher named Dr. Cooey. For instance, right now my tickler is saying to me, in tones too soft to reach my conscious mind, but do they stab into the unconscious? Day by day, in every way, I'm getting sharper and sharper. It alternates that with gutsier and gutsier, and, well, forget that. Cooey mostly used better and better, but that seems too general, and every 100th time it says them out loud, and the tickler gives me a brush, just a faint cooch, to make sure I'm keeping in touch. That third word pair, Daisy wondered, feeling her mouth reminiscently. Could I guess? Gunderson's eyes had been growing wider and wider. Fay, he said, I could no more use my mind for anything if I knew all that was going on in my inner ear than if I were being brushed down with brooms by 3 witches. Look here, he said with loud authority, you got to stop all this. It's crazy. Fay, if Micro'll junk the tickler, I'll think you up something else to invent, something real good. Your inventing days are over, Fay brilled gleefully. I mean, you'll never equal your masterpiece. How about, Gusterson bellowed, an anti-individual guided missile? The physicists have got small-scale anti-gravity good enough to float and fly something the size of a hand grenade. I can smell that, even though it's a back-of-the-safe military secret. Well, how about keying such a missile to a man's fingerprints, or brainwaves maybe, or his unique smell, so it can spot and follow him around, then target in on him without harming anyone else? Long-distance assassination, and the stinkin' just gets in. Or you could simply load it with some disgusting goo and key it to teenagers as a group. That'd take care of them. Fay, doesn't it give you a rich, warm kick to think of my midget missiles buzzing around in your tunnels, seeking out evildoers like a swarm of angry wasps or angelic bumblebees? You're not luring me down any side trails, Fay said laughingly. He grinned and twitched, then hurried toward the opposite wall, motioning them to follow. Outside, about 100 yards beyond the purple glass, rose another ancient glass-walled apartment skyscraper. Beyond, Lake Erie rippled glintingly. Another bomb test? Gunderson asked. Fay pointed at the building. Tomorrow, he announced, a modern factory, devoted solely to the manufacture of ticklers, will be erected on that site. You mean one of those windowless phallic eyesores? Gunderson demanded. Fay, you people aren't even consistent. You've got all your homes underground. Why not your factories? Shh! Not enough room. And night missiles are scarier. I know that building's been empty for a year, Daisy said uneasily. But how? Shh! Watch. Now! The looming building seemed to blur or fuzz for a moment. Then it was as if the lake's bright ripples had invaded the old glass 100 yards away. Wavelets chased themselves up and down the gleaming walls, became higher, higher, and then suddenly the glass cracked all over to tiny fragments and fell away, to be followed quickly by fragmented concrete and plastic piping, until all that was left was the nude steel framework, vibrating so rapidly as to be almost invisible against the gleaming sky. Daisy covered her ears, but there was no explosion, only a long, drawn-out, low crash as the fragments hit 20 floors below and dust whooshed out sideways. Spectacular, Fay summed up. Knew you'd enjoy it. That little trick was first conceived by the great Tesla during his last fruity years. Research discovered it in his biog. We just made the dream come true. A tiny resonance device you could carry in your belt bag attunes itself to the natural harmonic of a structure and then increases amplitude by tiny pushes exactly in time. Just like soldiers marching in step can break down a bridge. Only this is as if it were being done by one marching ant. He pointed at the naked framework appearing out of its own blur and said, "We'll be able to hang the factory on that. If not, we'll whip a megacurrent through it and vaporize it. No question the micro-resonator is the neatest, sweetest wrecking device going. You can expect a lot more of this sort of efficiency now that mankind has the tickler to enable him to use his full potential. What's the matter, folks?" Daisy was staring around the violet-walled room with dumb mistrust. Her hands were trembling. "You don't have to worry," Fay assured her with an understanding laugh. "This building's safe for a month more at least." Suddenly he grimaced and leapt a foot in the air. He raised a clawed hand to scratch his shoulder, but managed to check the movement. "Got to beat it, folks," he announced tersely. "My tickler gave me the grand cooch." "Don't go yet," Gunderson called, rousing himself with a shudder which he immediately explained. "I just had the illusion that if I shook myself all my flesh and guts would fall off my shimmying skeleton. Brr! Fay, before you and Micro go off half-cocked, I want you to know there's one insuperable objection to the tickler as a mass-market item. The average man or woman won't go to the considerable time and trouble it must take to load the tickler. He simply hasn't got the compulsive orderliness and willingness to plan that it requires." "We thought of that weeks ago." Fay rapped his hand on the door. "Every tickler spool that goes to market is patterned like wallpaper, with one of 5 designs of suitable subliminal supportive euphoric material. Ittier and ittier, viriler and viriler, you know. The buyer is robot interviewed for an hour, his personalized daily routine laid out and thereafter templated on his weekly spool. He's strongly urged next to take his tickler to his doctor and psycher for further instruction imposition. We've been working with the medical profession from the start. They love the tickler because it reminds people to take their medicine on the dot, and rest and eat and go to sleep just when and how Doc says. This is a big operation, Gussie. A big operation. Bye." Daisy hurried to the wall to watch him cross the park. Deep down she was a wee bit worried that he might linger to attach a micro-resonator to this building, and she wanted to time him. But Gusterson settled down to his typewriter and began to bat away. "I want to have another novel started," he explained to her, "before the ant marches across this building in about 4.5 weeks, or a million sharp little gutsy guys come swarming out of the ground and heave it into Lake Erie." Chapter 4. Early next morning, windowless walls began to crawl up the stripped skyscraper between them and the lake. Daisy pulled the blackout curtains on that side. For a day or two longer their thoughts and conversations were haunted by Gusterson's vague sardonic visions of a horde of tickler-energized moles pouring up out of the tunnels to tear down the remaining trees, tank the atmosphere, and perhaps somehow dismantle the stars. At least on this side of the world. But then they both settled back into their customary easygoing routines. Gusterson typed. Daisy made her daily shopping trip to a little topside daytime store, and started painting a mural on the floor of the empty apartment next to theirs. "We ought to lasso some neighbors," she suggested once. "I need somebody to hold my brushes and admire. How about you making a trip below at the cocktail hours, Gusterson, and picking up a couple of girls for a starter? Flash the old viriler charm, cooch them up a bit, emphasize the delights of high living, but make sure they're compatible roommates. You could pick up that 2-yard check from Micro at the same time." "You're an immoral, money-ravenous wench," Gusterson said absently, trying to dream of an insanity beyond insanity that would make his next novel a real id-rousing best vendor. "If that's your vision of me, you shouldn't have chewed up the VV mask." "I'd really prefer you with green stripes," he told her, "but stripes, spots, or sunbathing, you're better than those cocktail moles." Actually, both of them acutely disliked going below. They much preferred to perch in their eyrie and watch the people of Cleveland Depths, as they privately called the local suburb, rush up out of the shelters at dawn to work in the concrete fields and windowless factories, make their daytime jet trips and freeway jaunts, do their noon hour and coffee break guerrilla practice, and then go scurrying back at twilight to the atomic-proof, brightly lit, vastly exciting, claustrophobic caves. Fay and his projects began once more to seem dreamlike, though Gusterson did run across a cryptic advertisement for ticklers in the Manchester Guardian, which he got daily by facsimile. Their 3 children reported similar ads, of no interest to young Fry, on the TV, and one afternoon they came home with the startling news that the monitors at their subsurface school had been issued ticklers. On sharp interrogation by Gusterson, however, it appeared that these last were not ticklers, but merely two-way radios linked to the school police station transmitter. Which is bad enough, Gusterson commented later to Daisy, but it'd be even dirtier to think of those clock-watching superegos being strapped to kids' shoulders. Can you imagine Huck Finn with a tickler, telling him when to tie up the raft to a towhead and when to take a swim? I bet Fay could, Daisy countered. When's he going to bring you that check, anyhow? Iago wants a jet cycle, and I promised Imogene a Vena kit, and then Claudius'll have to have something. Gusterson scowled thoughtfully. You know, Daze, he said, I got a feeling Fay's in the hospital, all narcotized up and being fed intravenously. The way he was jumping around last time, that tickler was going to cooch him to pieces in a week. As if to refute this intuition, Fay turned up that very evening. The lights were dim. Something had gone wrong with the building's old transformer, and pending repairs, the 2 remaining occupied apartments were making do with batteries, which turned bright globes to mysterious amber candles and made Gusterson's ancient typewriter operate sluggishly. Fay's manner was subdued, or at least closely controlled, and for a moment Gusterson thought he'd shed his tickler. Then the little man came out of the shadows, and Gusterson saw the large bulge on his right shoulder. Yes, we had to up it a bit size-wise, Fay explained in clipped tones. Additional super features. While brilliantly successful on the whole, the subliminal euphorics were a shade too effective. Several hundred users went hoppity manic. We gentled the cooch and qualified the subliminals. You know, day by day, in every way, I'm getting sharper and more serene. But a stabilizing influence was still needed. So after a top-level conference, we decided to combine Tickler with Moodmaster. My God, Gusterson interjected, do they have a machine now that does that? Of course. They've been using them on ex-mental patients for years. I just don't keep up with progress, Gusterson said, shaking his head bleakly. I'm falling behind on all fronts. You ought to have your tickler remind you to read Science Service releases, Fay told him, or simply instruct it to scan the releases and... No, that's still in research. He looked at Gusterson's shoulder, and his eyes widened. You're not wearing the new model tickler I sent you, he said accusingly. I never got it, Gusterson assured him. Postmen deliver topside mail and parcels by throwing them on the high-speed garbage boosts and hoping a tornado will blow them to the right address. Then he added helpfully, maybe the Russians stole it while it was riding the whirlwinds. That's not a suitable topic for jesting. Fay frowned. We're hoping that Tickler will mobilize the full potential of the free world for the first time in history, Gusterson. You are going to have to wear a ticky-tick. It's becoming impossible for a man to get through modern life without one. Maybe I will, Gusterson said appeasingly, but right now tell me about Moodmaster. I want to put it in my new insanity novel. Fay shook his head. Your readers will just think you're behind the times if you use it, underplay it. But anyhow, Moodmaster is a simple physiotherapy engine that monitors bloodstream chemicals and body electricity. It ties directly into the bloodstream, keeping blood sugar, etc. at optimum levels and injecting Euphrin or Depressin as necessary, and occasionally a touch of extra adrenaline as during work emergencies. Is it painful? Daisy called from the bedroom. Excruciating, Gusterson called back. Excuse it, please. He grinned at Fay. Hey, didn't I suggest cocaine injections last time I saw you? So you did, Fay agreed flatly. Oh, by the way, Gussie, here's that check for a yard I promised you. Micro doesn't muzzle the ox. Hooray! Daisy cheered faintly. I thought you said it was going to be for two, Gusterson complained. Budgeting always forces a last-minute compromise, Fay shrugged. You have to learn to accept those things. I love accepting money, and I'm glad any time for 3 feet, Daisy called agreeably. 6 feet might make me wonder if I weren't an insect, but getting a yard just makes me feel like a gangster's moll. Want to come out and gloat over the yard paper, Toots, and stuff it in your diamond-embroidered net stocking top? Gusterson called back. No, I'm doing something to that portion of me just now, but hang on to the yard, Gusterson. Aye, aye, Cap'n, he assured her, then turning back to Fay. So, you've taken the Dr. Cooey repeating out of the tickler? Oh, no, just balanced it off with depressin. The subliminals are still a prime sales point. All the tickler features are cumulative, Gussie. You're still underestimating the scope of the device. I guess I am. What's this work emergencies business? If you're using the tickler to inject drugs into workers to keep them going, that's really just my cocaine suggestion modernized, and I'm putting in for another thou. Hundreds of years ago, the South American Indians chewed coca leaves to kill fatigue sensations. That's so. Interesting. And it proves priority for the Indians, doesn't it? I'll make a try for you, Gussie, but don't expect anything. He cleared his throat. His eyes grew distant, and turning his head a little to the right, he enunciated sharply, Pooh-Bah. Time, Inst 05-105700. Record. Gussie Coca, thou budget. Cut. He explained. We got a voice-cued setter now on the deluxe models. You can record a memo to yourself without taking off your shirt. Incidentally, I used the ends of the hours for trifle memos. I've already used up the 59s and 8s for tomorrow and started on the 57s. I understood most of your memo, Gusterson told him gruffly. The last 00 was for seconds, wasn't it? Now I call that crude. Why not microseconds, too? But how do you remember where you've made a memo so you don't record over it? After all, you're re-recording over the wallpaper all the time. Tickler beeps and then hunts for the nearest information free space. I see. And what's the Pooh-Bah for? Fay smiled. Cut. My password for activating this setter so it won't respond to chance numerals it overhears. But why Pooh-Bah? Fay grinned. Cut. And you a writer. It's a literary reference, Gussie. Pooh-Bah. Cut. Was Lord High everything else in the Mikado. He had a little list, and nothing on it would ever be missed. Oh, yeah, Gunderson remembered, glowering. As I recall it, all that went on that list was the names of people who were slated to have their heads chopped off by Coco. Better watch your steps, Shorty. It may be a backhanded omen. Maybe all those workers you're putting ticklers on to pump them full of adrenaline so they'll overwork without noticing it will revolt and come out someday chopping for your head. Spare me the Marxist mythology, Fay protested. Gussie, you've got a completely wrong slant on tickler. It's true that most of our mass sales so far, bar government and army, have been to large companies purchasing for their employees. Aha! But that's because there's nothing like a tickler for teaching a new man his job. It tells him from instant to instant what he must do, while he's already on the job and without disturbing other workers. Magnetizing a wire with a job pattern is the easiest thing going, and you'd be astonished what the subliminals do for employee morale. It's this way, Gussie. Most people are too improvident and unimaginative to see in advance the advantages of ticklers. They buy one because the company strongly suggests it, and payment is on easy installments withheld from salary. They find a tickler makes the work day go easier. The little fellow perched on your shoulder is a friend, exuding comfort and good advice. The first thing he's set to say is, "Take it easy, pal." Within a week they're wearing their ticklers 24 hours a day and buying a tickler for the wife so she'll remember to comb her hair and smile real pretty and cook favorite dishes. I get it, Fay, Gusterson cut in. The tickler is the newest fad for increasing worker efficiency. Once I read somewheres it was salt tablets. They had salt tablet dispensers everywhere, even in air-conditioned offices where there wasn't a moist armpit twice a year and the gals sweat only champagne. A decade later, people wondered what all those dusty white pills were for. Sometimes they mistook them for tranquilizers. It'll be the same way with ticklers. Somebody'll open a musty closet and see jumbled heaps of these gripping hand silvery gadgets gathering dust curls and... They will not, Fay protested vehemently. Ticklers are not a fad. They're history changers. They're free world revolutionary. Why, before Microsystems put a single one on the market, we made it a rule that every Micro employee had to wear one. If that's not having supreme confidence in a product. Every employee except the top executives, of course, Gusterson interrupted jeeringly. And that's not demoting you, Fay. As the R&D chief most closely involved, you'd naturally have to show special enthusiasm. But you're wrong there, Gussie, Fay crowed. Man for man, our top executives have been more enthusiastic about their personal ticklers than any other class of worker in the whole outfit. Gusterson slumped and shook his head. If that's the case, he said darkly, maybe mankind deserves the tickler. I'll say it does, Fay agreed loudly without thinking. Then, oh, can the carping, Gussie. Tickler's a great invention. Don't depreciate it just because you had something to do with its genesis. You're going to have to get in the swim and wear one. Maybe I'd rather drown horribly. Can the gloom talk too, Gussie? I said it before and I'll say it again. You're just scared of this new thing. Why, you've even got the drapes pulled so you won't have to look at the tickler factory. Yes, I am scared, Gusterson said. Really scared. Oh. Fay whirled around. Daisy was standing in the bedroom doorway, wearing the short silver sheath. This time there was no mask, but her bobbed hair was glitteringly silvered, while her legs, arms, hands, neck, face, every bit of her exposed skin, was painted with beautifully even vertical green stripes. I did it as a surprise for Gusterson, she explained to Fay. He says he likes me this way. The green glop's supposed to be smudge-proof. Gusterson did not comment. His face had a rapt expression. I'll tell you why your tickler's so popular, Fay, he said softly. It's not because it backstops the memory, or because it boosts the ego with subliminals. It's because it takes the hook out of a guy. It takes over the job of withstanding the pressure of living. See, Fay, here are all these little guys in this subterranean rat race with atomic death squares and chromium-plated reward squares and enough money if you pass go, almost to get to go again. And a million rules of the game to keep in mind. Well, here's this one little guy, and every morning he wakes up, there's all these things he's got to keep in mind or do, or he'll lose his turn 3 times in a row, and maybe a terrible black rook in iron armor loom up and bang him off the chessboard. But now, look, now he's got his tickler, and he tells his sweet silver tickler all these things, and the tickler's got to remember them. Of course, he'll have to do them eventually, but meanwhile, the pressure's off him. The hook's out of his short hairs. He's shifted the responsibility. Well, what's so bad about that? Fay broke in loudly. What's wrong with taking the pressure off little guys? Why shouldn't Tickler be a superego surrogate? Micro's motivations chief noticed that positive feature straight off and scored it 3 pluses. Besides, it's nothing but a gaudy way of saying that Tickler backstops the memory. Seriously, Gussie, what's so bad about it? I don't know, Gusterson said slowly, his eyes still far away. I just know it feels bad to me. He crinkled his big forehead. Well, for one thing, he said, it means that a man's taking orders from something else. He's got a kind of master. He's sinking back into a slave psychology. He's only taking orders from himself, Fay countered disgustedly. Tickler's just a mech reminder, a notebook, in essence no more than the back of an old envelope. It's no master. Are you absolutely sure of that? Gusterson asked quietly. Why, Gussie, you big oaf. Fay began heatedly. Suddenly his features quirked, and he twitched. "Excuse me, folks," he said rapidly, heading for the door, "but my tickler told me I gotta go." "Hey, Fay, don't you mean you told your tickler to tell you when it was time to go?" Gusterson called after him. Fay looked back in the doorway. He wet his lips, his eyes moved from side to side. "I'm not quite sure," he said in an odd, strained voice, and darted out. Gusterson stared for some seconds at the pattern of emptiness Fay had left. Then he shivered. Then he shrugged. "I must be slipping," he muttered. "I never even suggested something for him to invent." Then he looked around at Daisy, who was still standing poker-faced in her doorway. "Hey, you look like something out of the Arabian Nights," he told her. "Are you supposed to be anything special? How far do those stripes go, anyway?" "You could probably find out," she told him coolly. "All you have to do is kill me a dragon or two first." He studied her. "My God," he said reverently. "I really have all the fun in life. What do I do to deserve this?" "You've got a big gun," she told him, "and you go out in the world with it and hold up big companies and take yards and yards of money away from them in rolls like ribbon and bring it all home to me." "Don't say that about the gun again," he said. "Don't whisper it. Don't even think it. I've got one, damn it, .38 caliber yet. And I don't want some psionic monitor with two-way clairaudience they haven't told me about catching the whisper and coming to take the gun away from us. It's one of the few individuality symbols we've got left." Suddenly Daisy whirled away from the door, spun 3 times so that her silvered hair stood out like a metal coolie hat, and sank to a curtsy in the middle of the room. "I've just thought of what I am," she announced, fluttering her eyelashes at him. "I'm a sweet silver tickler with green stripes." End of Part 1 of The Creature from Cleveland Depths by Fritz Leiber.